Here's how I went from an advisor call to a landing page in 10 minutes. Let me show you. All right. So essentially, I had a call with Robert. He is one of our advisors, and we talked a bit about strategy for one of our assets, bridesmaid for hire, but also just in general about the potential to exit the business along the way. And while that's not our core focus, I think the narrative was essentially to figure out how to position ourselves better. Because right now we have let me show you. Right now we have essentially a business called Nichemates, which is an AI product studio. So this is like who builds these products. There is no clear kind of narrative around partnership outreach. So if we were to exit the business, we think the right way to do it is essentially to ask for partnerships first, because otherwise you're going to be looking, too desperate. So essentially you want the acquirer to, have the idea themselves to wanting to acquire your piece of technology, whatever you have to offer, right? So it's not a good place to be in to say like, hey, can you please buy my things? It's too desperate. Think of it as dating. It's more a kind of, let's have an eye-to-eye conversation. Here's what we have. How does that fit your business? How can we help you? And then once they start working with you, the relationship is built. There's either trust or there's not. And then essentially we, maybe get an offer. So they see that they want what we have to offer. That is the core idea, right? There's different ways to do it. Obviously, if you're looking for a financial or, less of a strategic acquirer, just list it on micro acquire or something, right? So there's different ways to do this, but this is the way we're aiming to do it. If that will work out, you will know later. All right. And essentially the goal that I had was, or what we talked about was, okay, if I send information to someone, there's Nichemates, there's bridesmaid for hire, which is essentially the asset we're talking about. How would I send something to someone that is interested to get more information, right, about what you're doing? And how can I narrow it down? And so the idea was essentially to create a separate domain, separate landing page that essentially just positions us as like, we are the AI solution builders for the wedding space or something, right? So essentially we would carve out a small niche and we would carve out a piece of real estate that we could send around for people that are, interested. I don't think these conversations will naturally start, online. So it's not like we do outreach and we say, here's our thing, like let's work together. But essentially it is just something that kind of narrowly shows our focus, shows what we have to offer, shows case studies. And this was like something that we can do today in order to just have something at hand, if we need it. And so instead of going and, planning a design and spending 20 years on this, I essentially just used a PRD generator. So a product requirements doc generator here. And I have all these system prompts. These are just different tools, different cloud projects, OpenAI projects, whatever. And they have different system prompts that I can switch here in this tool that I built essentially for myself, because I've done this workflow so many times. I just build it to make it better. And it created a PRD that outlines just everything we talked about, right? So we had this conversation, and in the conversation, we kept talking about like, oh, we should do this, we should do that, right? Like every call, there's like, we should, and nothing ever happens, right? Like we've all been there. And so it just immediately gave me an outline of like, what is this that I'm looking for? It gave me a layout and it gave me, something that I can execute on. And so what I then did, I was like, okay, here is how our landing page looks. Let's mirror that style, right? So it's just the Nichemates landing page. Just try to mirror that style. And it's like describing how does it look? Black and white for clean, minimalistic. So that's from the image, right? And now we have something that's even better. And then we have essentially something that we can just paste into V0. So the next step that I did was I went to V0 and I just pasted this in here. I'm going to show you. And I was like, okay, so what is the next step, right? And that essentially pumped out something like this, where we essentially, it's not pretty, right? Like it's good, but it's good enough. I think to send this around is good enough. And it showed everything that we talked about because everything already had been in context, right? And I essentially repurposed, and that's maybe the core theme here, the call learning. It's like I repurposed a call transcript into a website. just how I can repurpose a video transcript into shorts, or, like think of whatever you collect context as knowledge and try to make it as easy as possible to capture that context, to then repurpose it in whatever you want. And the key to repurposing is essentially which system prompt are you using? What is that outputting? Is it a markdown file? Is it, is it code? Is it something else? And you can just switch between these output formats. And one piece of context will have, more often than not, right? Like for the call example, the call has a summary, the call has next steps, the call has action items, the call has a website now, right? And the call has, follow-up items or something, right? So there's multiple outputs from one piece of context, and that's a kind of holistic way to look at these things. Just to think about what do I have at the core that I can expand into other things by giving it more information maybe, or just giving it the right instructions, right? And so now I have a site, again, nothing fancy, right? Like it doesn't look that good, but it's good enough, I think. And it has what we need to portray. We have, our first case study, which is Bridesmaid for Hire, and we're essentially positioning ourselves as like the wedding AI experts. And Jen is our, like Bridesmaid for Hire is our first case study. And we have a place where people can ask for more information, or, as we build out more tools, because that's the whole point. Like we want to show off what kind of cool tools we're building. We can add them here. We can add visuals, right? But that will be a long-term, or like, let's say midterm thing. As we get more aggressive or more serious about selling, we would be ramping this up. And for now, what we're doing is just essentially Jen will add this to her LinkedIn profile. She's like, oh, I'm working here. This is new. Come check it out. And if we have PR outreach or something, right now it's always been the case like, okay, this is the domain. This is Bridesmaid for Hire. But now we're doing more like techie outreach as well. So it's like, then often the question will be like, okay, who built this? And then you can say Bridesmaid for Hire, because that's not true. That's more, like a service business, or used to be. Now we also have AI tooling. Or it's like niche mates, but then it's like, okay, how are these people relate to the wedding industry? What makes them actually like experts in the wedding industry? And obviously that's the combination of like niche mates and Jen's domain knowledge, right? Like that makes us experts. It's not us, but it's her. And so now we have a place where we can put that, and then makes the narrative much more straightforward, right? Like if I send niche mates over to someone and they look at it and they're like, okay, how, I don't get it, right? And they churn, they're confused, they churn, they leave. And so if I send this over now, it's like, oh, okay, it makes sense, right? Like these guys, they're just building this and they're not doing anything else. And so that makes it more unique, stand out, easier to understand, and just overall lets us customize, for example, the experience on this landing page completely to the niche that we have. And it's been, 30 minutes of work. I think it was more time. I mean, it was like 10 minutes, and then some of it was collecting the context, and then some of it, I think, was buying the domain, because for some reason, Spanish domains are a pain in the ass to buy, even though I also bought Nischmitz. So this is like a Spanish domain, but the .com was taken. So I just got this one, and all these processes that are completely outside of what I'm doing with AI are still old and slow and the same. But yeah, I hope that this maybe gives you some ideas, like how you can repurpose call transcripts, or how you can think more holistically about context and deliverables and outputs of AI tooling. And yeah, feel free to subscribe below if it sounds interesting. I do these kind of walkthroughs more often, where I just show, not clickbait AI bullshit, but I'm essentially giving you ideas by showing how I use AI like every day, and how I think about AI and how I think about these workflows. And I think that not enough people are doing that. I'm maybe not the most interesting person doing that, but I do it, and I'll show and I share what I do. And so yeah, if this is kind of your vibe to do, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.